Hello there, and welcome back to the Fiction Author Business School podcast. How's everyone doing today? A few weeks ago, I did a podcast on showing versus telling in general, like how to write descriptions by showing rather than telling. That's episode 252 if you want to go back and review it, but I promised that I would continue that and talk about character thoughts and emotions. This is a question that I get a lot. How do you show character thought? How do you show character emotions rather than just telling the reader what they are? How do you show these things, especially since they aren't physical, right? These are valid questions. Emotions and thoughts are abstract things, they're energy. You can't describe their dimensions, for example, or their colors the same way that you would a piece of clothing. So how do you go about doing that? Well, today I'm going to tell you. And if this is something you struggle with, this might just be the most valuable podcast you listen to all year. So stay tuned. Do you yearn to make your living from writing fiction? Do you struggle to finish your manuscript due to block, indecision, or lack of confidence in your story? Have you already published books that just aren't getting the sales you'd like? The truth is, the thing that really makes a difference in book sales is not currently being taught in the fiction author space. And it comes from the story level, not the marketing level. Real talk, if you don't get it right at the story level, no amount of awesome marketing is going to make your book a bestseller. Hi, I'm Liesl. I've got 20 fiction books, 4 genres, the USA Today bestseller accolade, and multiple award wins under my belt. So, obviously I've been around the block a few times. I have a lot of readers that follow me from genre to genre, even though conventional wisdom says that's rare. Why? Because my readers know that I know how to tell a story that's going to make them feel something. And if you can master that skill, you can write anything you want for the rest of your life and know it will be well received by readers, which means better reviews, more gushing, more mega fans, and best of all, more royalties for you. Grab your fuzzy slippers and your chocolate of choice. I'm going to teach you how to emotionally engineer your story into the hearts and minds of your readers on purpose. Let's go. Okay, character thoughts. How do we show character thought? First of all, let's talk about what not to do in terms of formatting. It used to be a really popular thing in fiction writing to set a character's thoughts off from the rest of the sentence or paragraph by italicizing them or even by following them with a tag. So kind of like a dialogue tag, but it's like a thought tag instead. So it would be something like, I don't agree with what he's saying, Bob thought. And the Bob thought is the tag and it's being set off with a comma. Most of that, theoretically you can still do it. It's not technically incorrect, but it's really not the best practice. Readers these days are demanding deep POV, and it's something you're going to want to work on mastering, okay? What is deep POV? It means basically that you want to use as few tags as possible. So the idea is that putting a tag on something, it actually does pull the reader out of the story a little bit. And of course, readers are very used to seeing them. They're just part of fiction. That's all true. But if you were talking to your friend or your sister or your significant other and they're talking to you, we don't use those tags in real life. If somebody was always standing behind them going, your husband said, or your sister said, first of all, that would be creepy, but it would also be really irritating, But the reason we have to have those in fiction is to show who's speaking, because obviously this is happening in our imagination and we don't have the actual person that we can see who is speaking, right? So the idea was to do that for thoughts as well, but in deep POV, it's like you get so good at telling the story that you actually don't need to tag things. Now, I've never found any writer who can go without tags at all. That would be way too confusing. But it's basically keeping it to a minimum. So this is why it's no longer thought of as best practice to tag the thoughts or to put them in italics, because both of those pull the reader out of the story to a certain extent. It's better to make the thoughts be a natural and flowing part of the narrative. So how do we do that? Well, there's two possible ways. One is not quite as good as the other one. I'm going to give you the less good one first. If you truly feel that you need to say that these are the character's thoughts, say it first and as part of the sentence. So something like, Bob thought he could reach the book if he stretched a little higher. See how that seamlessly becomes part of the sentence? Setting the tag off on its own. So if I had done it the other way, I can reach the book if I stretch a little higher, thought Bob. Using that thought tag and setting it off with a comma, whether it precedes or follows the actual thought, it draws attention to itself. And on a very subtle level, it pulls the reader out of the story. If they become aware of the tag, even if it's only just for a second, rather than just absorbing it as part of the narrative, then you have pulled them out of the story, and that's exactly what we don't want, right? So you can do that. Like I said, just say Bob thought as part of the sentence rather than setting it off as a tag. But even that I don't prefer. That's still not the best way to do it. The better way is not to tag it at all. Just give us their thoughts. So the difference between dialogue and thoughts is that dialogue obviously is said out loud, and so we very often need to tag that because if we have a conversation going on between two or more characters, we need to be absolutely sure that the reader knows who's speaking. But assuming, and I am assuming, that you are following best practices for point of view choice, meaning you only have one character's point of view at a time and you're not head hopping, no head hopping, you're only ever going to get one person's thoughts, and that is the character whose head we're in, right? So you don't really need the tag, and that's why it becomes superfluous to add the tag. So the best way to do it is not to tag it at all. Just give us their thoughts. Don't tell us what their thoughts are about or say these are their thoughts. Just tell us straight up what they are thinking. So let me give you an example, one of my favorite examples from Harry Potter, book 4. I had to go pull my Harry Potter book out of its little Hogwarts trunk. This is book 4, and it's in the chapter called the Pensive, or the Pensive, if you're saying it with the proper English accent, but I'm an American who butchers that, so I call it the Pensive. Anyway, Harry is asking what the Pensive is, and Dumbledore says, "It is called a pensive. I sometimes find, and I'm sure you know the feeling, that I simply have too many thoughts and memories crammed into my mind." Said Harry, who couldn't truthfully say that he'd ever felt anything of the sort. So I always remember that because the first time I read it, it made me laugh really hard. I just thought Harry was hysterical. But the point is, it didn't say, "I've never thought anything of the sort," Harry thought, right? It doesn't say that. And it doesn't use the word thought or think in there anywhere. It has part of an actual dialogue where he says, and then it says, "said Harry," and then we get his thoughts, who couldn't truthfully say that he had ever felt anything of the sort. So these are his thoughts, which explain why he just said I mean, that's usually in the U.S. we say instead of but it's them not having an answer, not being able to come up with something to say. But that second part of the sentence is his thoughts that explains why he didn't know what to say, because he didn't know what Dumbledore was talking about, right? But the point is, it just tells us what he's thinking. It doesn't try to set it off. It doesn't give it a tag. It doesn't even say these are his thoughts, right? So anytime a character learns or experiences something new in a scene, something that they weren't already experiencing, just tell us what their thoughts are. It's like an internal thought reaction to what they just learned or what new thing just happened. So, of course, you can do that out loud, too. You can use dialogue. And you'll have to do that with non-POV characters because, again, no head hopping. But that's how you can show a character's thoughts. Don't say his thoughts strayed to something dark. Show us what those thoughts are by putting the actual thoughts he's having on the page, specific thoughts, okay? And you don't have to preface them with anything, and you don't have to tag them, and you don't have to set them off. Just tell us what the thoughts are. So there's not really a whole lot of, secret skill at doing that. Just tell us straight out what they are. Practice doing that, and practice doing it without saying thought or think or any version of that without putting a tag on it. Catch yourself when you do that and see if you can rework it so that it makes sense without that. If you can get rid of the tags and even saying he or she thought, but it still makes sense to the reader and they understand, then guess what? You have just learned to write in deep POV. And that is the ultimate goal. All right, so I hope that's clear. Once again, just to go over it, just give us their thoughts, exactly what they're thinking. Don't tell us anything about their thoughts. Just tell us what the actual thoughts are, and don't tag it with he thought or using the word thought anywhere in the sentence. Just straightforward, give us the thoughts. And assuming that, you've done a good job establishing the POV character, your reader will follow you. They know this is the POV character's thoughts, so don't overthink it. All right, so now let's turn to character emotions, which is the second thing I'm going to talk about today. As I said earlier, you cannot describe emotions directly with the five senses. Because an emotion is not a physical object with physical attributes, right? So how do we do this? There are two ways that you can and should describe emotions in a character. The first is body language with an emphasis on the expression, and the second is physical sensation. So let's talk about both of those. Body language is describing what they do physically in reaction to the emotion. So, for example, if you're describing sadness, maybe the character puts a hand over their face. Maybe tears are falling down. Maybe this is a major loss, a major grief they're going through, so their face contorts in agony. Maybe they double over, like their whole body doubles over. You see what I mean? Body language is how they physically react to the emotion that they're feeling. Everything I just said is pretty extreme. A physical reaction can be a glance. It can be just shifting their weight a little bit. It can be really subtle, or it can be really, really big. But this, of course, it includes the expression. Expression is really, really key for emotion, because if we use the doubling over example, a person can double over for more than one reason. They can do it because they're in pain. Either they were punched in the stomach, or it's an internal medical problem, what have you. Or it could be that they just ran a 5-minute mile and they're really tired and they're catching their breath. The action itself doesn't necessarily convey the emotion. It can, but you need to be really, really clear about what that emotion is. And usually the expression is going to be your clarifying part of the body, right? So especially if, like I said, if they're doubling over because they just received a major loss or grief, we do need to see that mirrored in their expression. So anytime that you are talking about a character and you want to say that they are feeling an emotion, you can still theoretically say the emotion, but you need to describe it with the body and the expression, and try to stay away from, the biggest way to tell an emotion is to say they are sad, or and this is something that my my critique group catches me on a lot when I'm being lazy and not, doing my best descriptive chops. I might say, his expression looked guarded. And they're like, no. What does that look like? Tell me what his expression looks like. So I can still say he looks guarded if, I don't have any way to describe that wouldn't mean any other expression, but also add in what his expression looks like. So I might say something like, his eyebrows drew down and his eyes shifted from side to side, and then I can work in, it made him look guarded or something. But the point is that just telling me that he looks guarded is telling, but showing me what that actually looks like on his features and as well on the body language, other than his expression, that's no longer telling, that is now showing me the emotion, okay? The second way that you can show an emotion is through physical sensation. Now, this is only going to be possible for your point of view character. You cannot, if you're in one person's head, then that person is not going to be able to feel the physical sensations of a different person. So keep that in mind. If it's a non-POV character in the scene, you're going to have to show it through an outward action, and you're going to have the POV character witnessing it, right? But assuming we're talking about the POV character and you're trying to convey an emotion, you can use physical sensation. Where are they feeling the emotion, and what are they feeling? See, and this is something, again, that is becoming, I talked about this last week, it's becoming more mainstream knowledge now. Very often we don't equate emotions with the physical. We have our physical bodies, and then we have our emotions, and we kind of link them because, we tend to feel our emotions in our heart. And of course that's located in our chest, but we still don't see them as physical because they aren't five senses, right? But the truth is, what we're starting to realize is that all of our emotions are connected to our body. And you hear this from people talking about emotions being felt in the body, being stuck in the body, needing to be released from the body, somatic exercise. A lot of that is becoming mainstream as we understand this better. But because of that, it's actually very effective to describe a character's emotion based on where they are feeling it in the body and what they're feeling. So if they're sad, do their hands and feet go cold? Does their stomach drop? Does their chest hurt? Hands and feet going cold can also be a fear reaction. So if they're afraid, does their scalp prickle? Does a chill run down their spine? Do their arm hairs stand on end? Does their heart pound faster? See what I mean? Just pick a part of the body and a physical sensation and use that to describe what they're feeling. Now, again, you can still use a word for the emotion so that it's very clear, but you don't have to do that. And it's better if you can convey the emotion without actually saying, he felt sad, he felt fear, whatever the case may be. You can even have a lot of fun with this. You can, if you want, come up with a somewhat non-universal way to feel an emotion, and just make it part of your character quirk. Like maybe you have someone that every time he gets really, really afraid, his left elbow tingles or something. And then the first time you would have to make sure that the audience understood that's what it was, like have the character actually say or think, oh, my elbow is tingling and that means I'm afraid, and then after that, every time his elbow tingles, they'll know that he's afraid. You see what I mean? So you could introduce it the first time and then you don't actually have to say it every time. You can do, that's actually a form of deep POV. But just make sure to give them the physical sensation, where it is and what it is, describe what they're feeling, what the sensation is. And that is how you demonstrate or illustrate the emotion as well, rather than just telling it. So let me give you a quick example. I decided to do fear, as that's the emotion that they're feeling, and the character's name is John, and I just kind of went with the first thing that came to mind. He's out in the woods, and he meets a grizzly bear face to face, right? So, example number 1, the grizzly bear stepped out from behind the tree. John was afraid. Obviously, that's just telling, right? That doesn't give us anything. We don't know what he looked like. We don't know how he reacted. We don't know how that fear felt to him. Nothing. Example number 2, the grizzly bear stepped out from behind the tree. A chill of terror zinged down John's spine. That's a lot better. At least we know what he's feeling and we know where he's feeling it, right? And for the third one, I just added even more to make it better. Example 3, the grizzly bear stepped out from behind the tree. A chill zinged down John's spine. His knees became weak and his stomach turned to ice. Now, even in that one, I didn't really show his expression, did I? In that case, if there's not someone watching him, he's not going to really know what his own expression is. So again, it's just a matter of whether you're describing the POV character or a non-POV character. But I think you get the idea. So let's recap. In order to show character thoughts, you just want to give us the thoughts straight out, tell us exactly what they're thinking specifically. Don't tell us about them. Don't use a tag like she thought. And if you possibly can manage it, don't even say she thought as part of the sentence. Just give us the thoughts. And then to show emotion, you're going to use body language with an emphasis on expression. Of course, the expression will only be for non-POV characters because the POV character cannot see their own expression, unless, of course, they're looking in a mirror or something. And then you're also going to use physical sensation. Pick a part of the body and tell us what sensation they are feeling in that part of the body. And if you do that, this is it, guys. This is how you show character thoughts and emotions. And it just takes practice. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. Like I said, I still have days when I'm a little bit lazy and my group has to catch me on it. And then there are other times that I just truly don't. I wasn't being lazy. I just truly didn't realize that I didn't show there. I told, it's totally normal and we're all going to do it sometimes. So it just takes practice to do it naturally. The more you practice this, the more you catch yourself, you will just start to do it naturally the first time that you write, and then you won't have as much editing to do. So one thing that you could do, I'm going to give you a recommendation. If this is something that you actively want to practice at, this is something that AI is really good for. Go to ChatGPT or your favorite AI source and just put in a prompt that says something like, please write me a 5-paragraph story in which the character's emotions are told and not shown. You might have to mess around with it a little bit. I've never actually used that prompt, so I can't say if it's really good or not. But, based on what it gives you, you can tweak it. And you can get ChatGPT to give you horribly written words, and that way you can practice on them. Okay, so that's something I do a lot for my students, especially when they're learning to edit for passive voice. So I would encourage you to do that, because the more you practice it and the more you do it, the more you will train your brain just to write this way. Most of the time when I'm writing, the first thing that comes into my mind might be, okay, he's sad, but that's not usually what I write. I really quickly, microsecond, shift into how am I showing this, and then I figure it out. You know what I mean? So as I'm typing, I'm showing rather than telling. I'm putting in all these details. And like I said, obviously I'm not perfect at it, but you can get to the point where you've trained yourself to do that most of the time. All right? So I hope this is helpful. Like I said, I've had a lot of questions on this, and so that's why I wanted to do this podcast, and hopefully you guys find a lot of value in it. Remember, if you haven't yet, that I am teaching the character workshop at, the third week in January, so it's going to be the 20th through the 23rd, how to craft characters that jump off the page without guessing, wasting time, or banging your head against the wall. Just to put this out there, I had a funny comment on, it might have been one of my ads or a couple of places that I posted the workshop in Facebook groups and things. And it was obviously someone being a little bit snarky, but they basically said, no, this doesn't interest me because I'd rather bang my head against the wall. And like I said, I think they were trying to be kind of mean and say that they thought it was stupid, but it just made me laugh. I was like, hey, you want to bang your head against the wall, man, you go for it. You know? Anyway, I just thought that was funny. But if you haven't signed up for it yet, make sure to sign up for it. It'll be really, really fun. This is a really great workshop. I've taught it several times, and we always have a ton of fun. So I will put the link to sign up for that in the show notes if you're interested. It's totally free, and I hope to see you there. Otherwise, I will see you next week on the next episode of the podcast. Have a great week of writing, guys. Thanks for listening today. If this episode helped or inspired you in any way, would you do me a solid and leave me a review? Reviews help other fiction authors find the podcast. You could also recommend it to a writer friend of yours so they can get the same inspiration you got. Remember, you have a story inside you that only you can tell. So get out there and write your soul story, because your readers are waiting for it with bated breath.